In the modern world, where information and noise flood every passing moment, our minds seem to never stop spinning. Worries, unanswered questions, and sometimes just scattered thoughts prevent us from finding peace. But is it possible to slow down, to hear the whispers from deep within our souls? Can we find stillness in a chaotic world? Today, I invite you to join me on a journey of relaxation, a journey to explore profound ideas from the greatest minds in the history of philosophy. Let us guide you into a quiet space where questions about life, existence, and the nature of humanity are not only posed but shared in a gentle, soothing voice, like a confidant, leading you to sleep through each philosophical inquiry. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Let us, together, slowly, step by step, touch upon those strange yet profound ideas to understand more about the inner world of ourselves before we drift into deep sleep. There are moments in life when we feel as if we are looking at the world through a fogged glass. Everything becomes hazy, hard to grasp, and sometimes we feel as though we will never truly understand the truth of what is happening around us. Plato, one of the greatest philosophers in human history, pointed out that in reality, we often live in the darkness of what we think is the truth, while the true truth lies beyond the reach of our senses. Plato used the image of prisoners in a cave to illustrate this condition. They can only see shadows on the wall, unaware that these shadows are mere reflections of the real entities behind them. What we see is a mere shadow of the world. In Plato's world, the truth is not what we see, but the forms, eternal and perfect ideals, of which all material things in this world are mere faint, imperfect copies. Imagine yourself as one of the prisoners in that cave. You were born and raised there, never knowing the sunlight, only the darkness, and the shadows on the wall were the only reality you've ever known. In the stillness of that darkness, all your thoughts about the world are formed by those shapes you see, those blurry, incomplete reflections. But one day, you are freed and step out of the cave. The light of the truth shines into your eyes, and you are filled with a boundless amazement. You see the perfect and eternal forms that Plato called the forms. Beauty, goodness, justice, things that seem to only exist in thought, now become reality. But this overwhelming feeling does not last long. The light of truth, though bright, can also be blinding, and you feel yourself sinking into unease. For the truth is not always pleasant. It is not always something we can easily accept. Plato explained that humans always tend to seek comfort in the darkness of illusions, because they are familiar, comfortable, and do not require us to change. This is similar to how we live in today's society. We seek certainty in the prejudices and beliefs that have been built up, rather than opening ourselves to the truth, even though that truth may shake us to the core. We live in our own caves, accepting the darkness as the only reality, and never doubting that there could be a brighter, clearer truth. Plato, with his profound insight, showed us that the truth is not always easy, and we are not always ready to face it. But he also reminded us that only when we step out of the darkness of illusions, only when we see the light of truth, can we truly live a full and meaningful life. When we begin to confront the truth, it is also when we realize what we have lost while living in the darkness. As Plato said, the truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. Feelings of fatigue, frustration, and unease will come, because the truth is not easy to accept. But only when we accept it, only when we allow ourselves to feel it, can we move forward, transcend the limits of what we once knew, and step into a new space where life becomes fuller and more complete. This leads us to a very important question about our life and existence in this world. Are we willing to step out of the darkness, to face the light of truth? This may make us feel scared and uneasy, but once we overcome that fear, we will find ourselves standing before a much larger world. The truth is not something that can be easily grasped, but it is always present, whether we realize it or not. And as Plato pointed out, that truth can only be discovered when we decide to confront the darkness within our souls, so that we can open a new door, leading us to a world of deeper understanding. So perhaps these questions don't need to be answered right away. But in this moment, as you lie down and begin to feel the stillness spreading through your body, let these questions gently enter your subconscious. Let them flow through your mind, like a gentle wave, not rushed, not forced, just the awareness of the world around you. This is how Plato invites us to look at the world, to look at ourselves and realize that sometimes the truth is not always comfortable, but only by facing it can we find true freedom. In this life, we often get caught up in routines and daily tasks, sometimes never pausing to ask ourselves, why am I doing these things? We live without reflection, following a predetermined path, and in doing so, forget to question the true meaning of life and the essence of ourselves. This is the condition that Socrates warned about over 2,000 years ago. The unexamined life is not worth living. A wake-up call for all of us, those who never stop to reflect on our own lives. Socrates was not a philosopher who provided ready-made answers. He did not rush to declare absolute truths, but instead used the method of questioning to dig deeper into human understanding. In his dialogues, Socrates did not offer clear explanations or dry philosophical formulas. Instead, he drew his interlocutors into a journey of thought, a journey of self-exploration through sharp, challenging questions. Imagine a dialogue between you and Socrates. You begin with a familiar statement about life, about values that you think are self-evident, things that society has taught you since childhood. But Socrates, with patience and calmness, begins to ask simple questions that shake the very foundations of beliefs you've built over your lifetime. Are you sure that what you believe to be true is truly true? Have you ever asked yourself why you believe that? In those questions, Socrates not only seeks answers, but wants the listener to think for themselves, to question everything they have trusted. This method, called the Socratic method, is an awakening. It doesn't make people feel comfortable, but it is the only way for us to break free from complacency and routine. Imagine sitting in a quiet space where everything stops and only the questions echo in your mind, urging you to pause and reflect. Why am I doing this? Do I truly understand what I'm doing? And gradually, the layers of thoughts around you begin to fall away. Socrates likely understood best that life is not just a series of days strung together, but an ongoing journey of self-discovery about the world and about the values we are pursuing. This might make us feel uneasy, as though a cold wind is blowing through beliefs we once thought were solid. But it is in those moments of hesitation that we begin to understand life more profoundly. The unexamined life is not worth living is not just a quote. It is an invitation to face ourselves, to uncover what lies hidden in our souls, and to realize that only when we live authentically, in tune with our true nature, can we experience the deeper meaning of life. When Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living," he was not only talking about searching for grand answers to philosophical problems, but also about living mindfully, about not allowing ourselves to be swept along by society's current, forgetting who we truly are. Each day that passes, we are more easily distracted by the noise of work, money, and success. But it is in those quiet moments, when we are no longer caught in the chaos of society, that we can see what truly matters. Only by asking questions, by reflecting on ourselves, can we truly live fully. When Socrates questioned others, he was not the one with the ready answers. He was the one who sparked the questions, the doubts that led others to seek the truth. This highlights the importance of thinking for ourselves, of discovering the truth rather than merely accepting what others tell us. Socrates' questions were not merely to resolve issues. They were tools to help us delve into the essence of the matter, so we are not trapped in the obvious things we often overlook. So, as you lie here, in the quiet of the night, ask yourself, am I living an automatic life, a life without reflection? Am I accepting what I've been taught without ever doubting it? These questions are not meant to create anxiety or confusion, but to help you gain a clearer understanding of yourself, of what you truly want and need in life. When you begin to reflect, you will feel as though a fresh wind has blown through your soul, helping you realize truths you had never recognized before. From here, you will realize that it is in those quiet moments, when there is nothing but self-questioning, that your soul expands, that you begin to explore the deepest parts of yourself. Like a journey that never ends, each question Socrates poses is a step forward, a new discovery about humanity, about life, and about what we are truly seeking. And as you gently drift into sleep, let these questions continue to settle in your mind, like soft ripples, unhurried, unforced. Let them guide you into a restful sleep, as Socrates' questions continue to resonate in the quiet space of your soul. In this ever-changing world, there are moments when we feel lost, adrift in an ocean with no shore. Each day, we dive into tasks and goals that sometimes we don't even fully understand why we are pursuing them. We long for success, but at times, in the quietest of moments, we ask ourselves, what is my purpose? This question is not just about career or external achievements. It's a deeper inquiry about the meaning of life, about the essence of our very existence. And it is in those moments that Aristotle's philosophy on purpose and self-realization can offer profound reflections, guiding us back to our true selves. Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of Western thought, believed that everything in life, every object and event, exists for a particular purpose. This is a core principle of his philosophy. Telos, or the ultimate goal, is what all things are directed toward. According to Aristotle, nothing in the universe is random or meaningless. Everything, from the smallest seed to a human being, exists for a reason, and it is that reason, that final cause, that determines its development and perfection. A tree blooms, a bird flies, or a human lives. Each has a final goal it is moving toward. When thinking about our own lives, we might see that each phase, each challenge we face, leads us to a specific purpose. The good for man is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. This saying by Aristotle reminds us that happiness is not something attained externally, but rather is the development of our inner self, the activity of the soul in harmony with virtue. For Aristotle, virtue is not an inherent trait, but a habit nurtured through right choices every day. Virtue is not a singular action, but a combination of small actions in life, habits that we cultivate to strive for perfection. And, according to Aristotle, when we live a life aligned with virtue, we will find true peace and happiness. But then a question arises. Is happiness the ultimate purpose of human life? Aristotle answers that although happiness is the inevitable goal humans aim for, it is not an easy destination. Happiness comes from finding balance in life, from knowing how to adjust the elements within our soul and actions to align appropriately. Aristotle calls this the golden mean, the state of moderation. Happiness is not the excessive satisfaction of desires or the total rejection of life's offerings. It is the ability to live in balance, to choose what is good and avoid extremes. The virtue lies between deficiency and excess, he said. It is this adjustment in actions, in thoughts, and in emotions that is the key to a fulfilling life. The goal Aristotle calls eudaimonia, or true happiness, not a fleeting sense of satisfaction, but a stable mental state where one lives in accordance with their true nature and potential. But is the search for purpose in life always easy? And if a life cannot find balance, can we truly live fully? There are times when life presents us with difficult challenges, and in those moments we may feel lost, as though there is no purpose left. In such times, perhaps we need to remember Aristotle's philosophy of the four causes, the four reasons that explain why a thing exists. The first is the material cause, the element that gives rise to the thing. It is what makes something exist. Next is the formal cause, which is the essence, the pattern of the thing. The third cause is the efficient cause, the actions or events that bring the thing into being. And lastly, the final cause, which is the ultimate purpose that the thing is directed toward. These causes not only help us understand the reason for everything's existence, but they also help us understand our own lives. We cannot merely look at the surface of life. We must look deeply into the purpose and reason for why we do what we do. In everyday life, each action, each decision we make reflects one of these four causes. Each step, each challenge we face is a part of the journey toward telos, the ultimate goal Aristotle spoke of. And perhaps it is in those moments that seem to be at a standstill, when we feel lost, that we need to look within to realize that each moment, each challenge in life has a reason. It holds a lesson. We may not fully understand it yet, but it is through this journey of seeking purpose that we will find clarity and peace for our souls. Imagine sitting by the beach, where the waves gently wash against the shore, letting each wave carry away the fatigue and worries of life. Every word of Aristotle, soft and profound, sinks into your mind, helping you realize that life is not a race, not a path of chasing success, but a continuous journey of seeking balance, moderation, and self-realization. And when you begin to see the purpose, you will realize that happiness does not always come from grand things, but sometimes it is simply the peace in the quiet moments, in each breath, in every slow step, full of mindfulness. When you feel the stillness in your soul, when you understand that every action, every choice you make has a reason, a purpose, you will see that life becomes clearer and everything begins to fall into place. That is eudaimonia. Happiness is not something to be sought externally, but an internal state when you live true to your essence and purpose. And so, you can gently drift into sleep, in the peaceful awareness of life, of purpose, and the balance you found within yourself. In a world full of chaos and turbulence, we often feel as though we are swept up in a whirlwind of ever-changing emotions, thoughts, and beliefs. Each day, we live with thoughts, decisions, and relationships that sometimes we aren't even sure of their true nature. The feeling of uncertainty, ambiguity, and sometimes anxiety is ever present in each moment of our lives. But perhaps it is in these moments that we need to return to a question that the great philosopher René Descartes posed in the 17th century. What is certain? What is real? Descartes, the founder of modern philosophy, began his journey to seek certainty from a foundation that could not be doubted. He did not start by searching for ready-made answers. Instead, he began by doubting everything, a method he called radical doubt. Descartes realized that everything we perceive, everything we trust, even the things we think are self-evident, could be doubted. In a world full of change and deception, can we truly know what is real? Imagine you are sitting in a quiet room on a dark night. The wind softly whispers through the window, and everything around you seems to pause. You begin to wonder, could everything you see and feel really be as it seems? The feeling of the world, of time, of yourself, it might all be an illusion, a projection of your mind. In that moment, you no longer know what is real and what is false. It is here that Descartes asks us to stop and think, what is certain in this world? Descartes' doubt was not about abandonment, but about seeking a deeper truth. He realized that everything could be doubted, but there was one thing that could not be doubted. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. This is the starting point of discovering the essence of humanity and the world. To answer the question of certainty, Descartes found one single foundation that nothing could erode: the existence of oneself as a being capable of thinking, capable of doubting, capable of questioning everything around. I think, therefore I am. This simple yet powerful realization affirms that human existence is not something that can be denied. While we may doubt everything, the mere fact that we are capable of doubting means that we can be certain of our existence. Everything else may change, may be an illusion, but the very ability to think, the ability to reflect and be self-aware, is what is immutable, the undeniable proof of our existence. The radical doubt Descartes applied is not just a philosophical method. It is a way of life. He did not only ask, "Do I exist?" but also wanted each of us to question every belief and value we are pursuing in life. Think about what you believe, about your work, your relationships, the prejudices you carry. Have you ever asked yourself, is all of this really certain? Are you living your life with mindfulness, or are you merely following habits and reflections of others? When we begin to doubt, begin to question what we assume is self-evident, we are not weak or lost. On the contrary, that is the first step to break free from the constraints of automatic thoughts, of blind beliefs. As Descartes pointed out, doubt is not a negative thing. Doubt is the method that helps us separate truth from illusion so that we can find what is solid, what is real, what is unchangeable. By applying this method to our lives, we will realize that what we are living may not be the absolute truth. We can change. We can be freer in redefining the beliefs, the values that we have held for so many years. Every question posed to ourselves is not an act of destruction, but an opportunity for rebirth, for stepping out of old frameworks and seeing the world from a new perspective. It is a long journey where we learn to face the truth of our own being, and from there, step out of the shadows of illusions. You may feel a bit anxious when facing this doubt, but remember, it is in those moments of doubt that you will discover your true power. When nothing is certain, when no belief is firm, it is that very thinking self, that ability to think and recognize your own existence, that will make you realize that you do exist. And if you can think, you can change. Let these thoughts embrace your soul like gentle waves in the dark night. Let them remind you that you can choose to live mindfully, to reflect and question everything, including yourself, and from there, find peace in the doubt. That is the first step toward spiritual freedom. Freedom in recognizing and living true to your own essence. As you slowly drift into sleep, let these questions gently seep into your mind. Do not fear the doubt, for it is within it that you will find clarity, freedom, and the peace you seek. I think, therefore I am. You are a thinking being, and therefore you exist. And in this existence, you will always have the ability to explore, change, and live a full, meaningful life. In the quiet of the night, when all sounds have ceased and only the slow flow of thoughts remains, you may encounter a question that, from deep within your being, cannot be avoided. What am I here for? This is not only a question about life's purpose, but a question that brings with it a deeper sense of unrest, a gnawing feeling about the instability within oneself, about the vast emptiness that we cannot fill with anything outside of ourselves. Blaise Pascal, a great philosopher and mathematician of the 17th century, spent his life reflecting on these issues. One of his most profound discoveries was the horror of the infinite void that humanity must face. Pascal realized that in the journey of life, there is a deep void in each human soul, a void that cannot be filled by material things or external achievements. And that is the fear of existence, the fear of humanity's fragility in the vastness of the universe. Through his reflections, Pascal argued that we run away from this fear by seeking certainty in temporary things, in belief systems constructed by society, religion, or even in philosophical theories. But what we cannot escape is the confrontation with meaninglessness, the endless existence that no one can fully explain. And it is within this fear that Pascal poses an important question. Can we believe in anything, or will we forever doubt and drown in that fear? Pascal's Wager is one of his most notable arguments about belief and existence. Pascal argued that in the ambiguity of life, we are faced with a choice, to believe in God or not. But Pascal did not ask us to have perfect or absolute faith. Instead, he argued that in a context where we cannot be sure whether a spiritual world exists or not, choosing to believe in a higher power is a bet that makes logical sense. He said, if you gain all. If you lose nothing. In a world full of uncertainty, choosing to believe in something greater, despite the lack of clear evidence, is a choice that cannot lose. If you believe in God and the spiritual world truly exists, you will gain eternal salvation. If not, you lose nothing significant, only fleeting moments in life that are otherwise meaningless. The beauty of Pascal's Wager is that it does not demand absolute belief from the start. It is a wise choice, a decision based on reason between doubt and the search for meaning. In Pascal's thinking, the fear of life's meaninglessness created a vast space that we cannot fill. And while we seek comfort in theories or beliefs, the anxiety of existence is ever present. This void, the fear of being left alone in the vast universe without a purpose, is what Pascal wants us to face and resolve. Man is but a reed, the most feeble thing in nature, but he is a thinking reed. The fragility of humanity can make us feel small, but it is in our ability to think and be aware that we can find meaning and purpose in life. When you think about your own life, do you ever feel like you are running away from the big questions about existence, about the things that cannot be explained? Let these questions not be the things that scare you, but a call to pause, to ask yourself, and to find peace in that doubt. Pascal did not ask us to believe in God blindly. He invited us to believe that in the search and the questioning, we can discover a belief that will guide us through the infinite voids. Like an inner journey, life is not an absolute answer, but a series of questions we need to ask ourselves. And as Pascal pointed out, when we face these questions, instead of fear, we can choose to live a meaningful life, based on belief belief in something greater, whether in ourselves, in life, or in some invisible force. And as we slowly drift into sleep, let these questions gently resonate in your mind, not to seek answers immediately, but to recognize that in the search, in the doubt, we are also opening our hearts to the infinite possibilities of life. Pascal has helped us realize that doubt is not weakness, but a strength, a way for us to find meaning in the very uncertainty of this world. In the darkness of the night, as your mind begins to settle, let Pascal's doubt, like a soft wave, gently soothe your soul and guide you into sleep with peace and serenity. In the quiet space of the night, when all sounds have ceased and only slow thoughts drift through your mind, you may encounter a vague sensation of existence that quietly takes over your consciousness. You wonder, is there a reality beyond what we can perceive? Is there an invisible force that governs this world? The question of God, of the existence of a supernatural force, is one of the greatest questions humanity has always asked throughout history. But one of the greatest philosophers of the 17th century, Baruch Spinoza, offered a very different, profound answer, which perhaps aligns perfectly with a world that is gradually awakening, like the world we live in today. Spinoza did not view God as a character with form, personality, or distinct traits as seen in traditional religions. Instead, he saw God not as an entity beyond the world, but as nature itself. According to Spinoza, God is nature. For him, God was not a divine being reigning over humanity from some distant realm, but a unified reality in which both mind and matter are two attributes of a single essence. There is no distinction between God and the world. Everything is a part of each other. Everything is one. Deus save natura. God is nature. This famous motto of Spinoza affirms the inseparable relationship between God and nature. Spinoza taught that everything in this world, from the distant stars to the small stones beneath our feet, is an expression of one single entity, nature. There is nothing outside of nature, nothing outside of God. What we see, what we feel, all of it is part of a unified and infinite system. In the stillness of the night, as you begin to feel the movement of the air, the soft sounds of the world around you, try to imagine that every breeze in the air, every gust of wind, is an expression of an invisible, infinite entity. There is no difference between what you see and what you cannot see. All is God. All is part of nature. This brings us not a sense of separation or abstraction, but a profound connection, an intimate oneness with the world around us. And when Spinoza spoke of this unified essence, he was not just talking about the grandeur of the universe, but also about the freedom and nature of humanity. When you see the world and God not as two separate entities, you will begin to feel a deep peace. The separation between I and the other, between human and world, will gradually fade. You will no longer feel lost or alone. Instead, you will realize that you are part of a great flow where everything is interconnected and in harmony. For this reason, Spinoza believed that happiness and freedom are not things we seek externally, but rather the awareness of the unified nature of the universe and the integration into it. To better understand how Spinoza explains this, imagine a river. Every drop of water in the river, whether on the surface or deep at the bottom, is part of the river, and each of those drops carries with it a part of the whole of nature. Similarly, every thought, emotion, and action of a human being is part of a greater whole, connected through the essence of nature, through the essence of God. So if God is nature, if everything is a unified entity, then why do we feel disconnected from the world, separated from those around us? According to Spinoza, This is the result of ignorance and the lack of awareness of our true nature. Humans live in a division between reason and emotion, between thought and action. We live in a world where we believe we are the center, the subject with control, when in fact we are just a small part of the endless flow of nature. The more you understand nature, the more you understand yourself. This quote by Spinoza is not just advice about knowledge, it is a call to awakening. When we understand the connection between ourselves and the universe, between ourselves and the world around us, we will feel at peace. There will be no more distinction between I and you, between the self and the other, between me and the world. All is one. As you sit down, relax, and begin to feel your breath, let these thoughts gently flow through your mind. Let them softly remind you that you are never separate from this world. You're a part of this universe, a part of the endless flow of nature. There is nothing alien, nothing that is not a part of you. We are not isolated beings in a meaningless world, but small parts of a magnificent system where everything is interconnected and in harmony. And as you slowly drift into sleep, let these thoughts continue to soothe you like gentle waves. God is nature. You are part of nature. You are part of God. And when you realize this, you will feel the peace, the connection, and the harmony you have always sought. There are times in the stillness of the late night when you lie down and feel each breath that you suddenly realize something strange. Everything you see, hear, and feel is merely the way your mind shapes the world. The world is not an objective reality, not what is happening independently outside of you. As Kant pointed out, we never see the world as it is. We only see what our minds extract, adjust, and form from the information our senses gather. This is not only a philosophical discovery, but a profound awakening about how we live and perceive. Immanuel Kant, one of the greatest philosophers of the 18th century, brought about a profound shift in the way we understand morality, reason, and the world around us. Kant didn't simply ask questions about the world. He challenged the way we perceive everything, from the smallest objects to the greatest moral dilemmas. He discovered a fundamental principle in his philosophy. The only thing that is good without qualification is a good will. It is the will to do what is right simply because it is right, the core of morality. This is not following a command or a habit. It is acting from integrity, a universal principle that does not depend on the consequences or circumstances. While we see the world through the filter of our senses, Kant pointed out that these senses are only tools. They cannot provide us with an absolute understanding of the world. In fact, the world we live in, everything we see, hear, and feel, is merely phenomena, forms that our minds create based on their internal rules. And it is in these phenomena that we seek meaning, understanding, and truth. Kant referred to this as noumenon, the thing in itself, the true essence we can never fully reach because the human mind is limited to understanding only through phenomena, never touching the full nature of things. In this darkness of the night, when you close your eyes and let your thoughts gradually drift into stillness, try to imagine that everything you are seeing is merely a reflection in a fogged mirror. Everything, every event around you, is only the image recreated by your mind. You cannot see the world as it truly is. You can only perceive what has been rearranged in your brain. But the question is, can we truly live a moral life? A life directed toward what is good, even if we can never be sure that all we see is the truth? Kant explained that while we cannot access absolute truth, we can find a principle for living rightly, a moral path that does not depend on circumstances or the outcomes of our actions. This is why he developed the theory of practical reason. He believed that morality is not a choice based on emotions or personal gain, but the adherence to rational principles, principles that apply to every situation, regardless of whether we have an accurate understanding of the world. Morality, according to Kant, must be based on universal principles, principles that can apply to all people, all times. It might feel strange to think that morality is not about doing what feels right, but about following principles that can be reasonably applied to everyone in all circumstances. But it is in understanding that morality is part of a logical system, a system that does not depend on emotions or personal preferences, that we can find peace in living true to ourselves. And it is in that living that we begin to understand the world, ourselves, and the relationships we build. Kant also emphasized that when we live according to a solid moral principle, we do not just live for ourselves, but for others, for a community, for society. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. Each of our actions not only affects us, but also those around us, and if each action of ours is directed toward goodness, fairness, then that is how we contribute to a better society. So, in these moments, as you gently drift into sleep, try to reflect on your life. Have you lived a life based on solid moral principles? Do you live according to the rational principles you believe in? Perhaps in the darkness of the night, as your mind seeks stillness, Kant's question will become a part of your late-night reflections. Not to create worry, but to help you understand that this life is a journey toward a deeper understanding of yourself, of the world, and of how we can live a moral life, even without fully knowing all that we see. As you gently drift into sleep, let Kant's questions continue to echo softly in your mind. These questions are not things you need to answer immediately, but reflections to help you live more mindfully and consciously about how you shape your world. A world you can build from the moral principles you trust. In the darkness of the night, as you begin to sense the stillness enveloping you, thoughts about the world and the nature of existence gradually become clearer. Have you ever felt lost among values, among beliefs that have been built within society, unsure whether they still truly align with your own life? Is there a solid foundation on which to build a life, or are all these merely artificial constructs that we have erected from what has been passed down? These deep, haunting questions are what the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche faced, and it was he who offered us a radically different view of the world and existence. Nietzsche was one of the most prominent philosophers of the 19th century, with profound thoughts on humanity, society, and the search for meaning in a world full of turmoil. He is famous for his declaration, "God is dead," a statement that reverberates in the history of philosophy, yet is filled with profound meanings. When Nietzsche proclaimed that God is dead, he was not only speaking about the collapse of traditional religions, but also about the disintegration of the moral foundation that Western society had built over thousands of years. God, or at least the image of a God who could control and grant morality, was no longer the source of values. The collapse of religion led to a profound emptiness within human souls, a crisis of values that could not easily be resolved. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him, Friedrich Nietzsche, the gay science. This affirmation from Nietzsche reminds us that in a society where belief in God no longer holds, humans must face emptiness, the absence of a clear moral foundation to cling to. The values that we once thought were absolute and unchanging now become ambiguous and undefined. We no longer see the world through the lens of heavenly moral principles, but must instead create new values from within ourselves and from personal experiences. When belief in God fades, humanity seems to fall into a deep pit of confusion. Every moral foundation, every rule we thought was built upon a sacred source, now reveals its fragility and susceptibility to erosion. Nothing is defined with certainty anymore. Everything can be questioned, every value can be doubted. In a world like this, how can humans live rightly? How can they find purpose and meaning in life? Nietzsche did not simply criticize the collapse of traditional values, but opened a new path, a new way of life for humanity. Instead of clinging to outdated values that no longer fit, he called on humanity to create new values, values based on what truly holds meaning for oneself in a world without absolute standards. He called this the Übermensch, or the Superman, an individual who rises above the dependence on traditional values and creates their own path, their own higher life goal, transcending the self. Become who you are. Friedrich Nietzsche, thus spoke Zarathustra. With this statement, Nietzsche invites each of us to explore and become ourselves, not following any pre-established model, but drawing from internal values, from what we believe in and aim toward. Nietzsche believed that only when we create values for ourselves, when we choose our own path in life, can we live a complete life, no longer bound by outdated beliefs and values that no longer fit. This is a powerful and challenging perspective. When the world no longer has absolute values, when morality is no longer dictated by God or a higher power, humanity must find a way to live without losing meaning. In this moment, Nietzsche teaches us that it is the freedom to create new values that is our salvation, our liberation. But this is not an easy liberation. It requires us to face ourselves, to dare to let go of old standards, old beliefs, and rebuild our world from the deepest parts of ourselves. This may make you feel unsettled, like a ship without a rudder adrift on a vast sea. But it is in this uncertainty that we find freedom. And in this freedom, we can feel a deep sense of peace, because when you begin to create values for yourself, you are also rediscovering your true nature and finding purpose in each decision you make. As you lie down and feel the peace surrounding you, let Nietzsche's words gently seep into your mind. Become who you are. You can freely create your own values, no longer bound by old beliefs, no longer afraid of the uncertainty of life. When you begin to live mindfully, you will realize that in the very act of creating new values, you will find the peace and freedom you have always sought. And as you drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently embrace you, like soft waves. God may be dead, but the path you create for yourself, with the values you hold dear, will forever live within you like a guiding flame in the dark night. In the stillness of the night, when the world outside seems to settle and the sounds of life give way to peace, you may feel a gentle sense of unease spreading through your mind. Are we living authentically, or are we merely a shadow in the crowd, like everyone else? Questions like these may arise when you begin to quiet your mind and face yourself, especially in a world where, with each passing day, we can easily become entangled in social relationships and external expectations. And in those moments, the philosophy of Martin Heidegger about the they-self and authenticity may open a profound direction of thought, guiding us back to ourselves. Heidegger, with his deep philosophical insights, explored a crucial concept he called das Mannbild, or the they-self, to describe the people we become in society, people dominated by shared norms and expectations. We live in a society and therefore cannot avoid the influence of others, the beliefs, viewpoints, and values that society shapes for us. It is in this gravitational pull that we may gradually lose touch with our true selves. Heidegger argued that most of us live a life of they, a life consumed by rules and expectations that we did not truly choose, but merely follow because it is what society demands. The they is the one who tells us what to do. Heidegger points out that we too easily get caught up in the whirlwind of societal standards, to the point where we forget ourselves, forgetting those deep questions about purpose and meaning in life. In modern society, where everyone seems to be racing toward personal goals and external success, Heidegger invites us to stop and reflect on what truly matters. We do not just live in a material world, but also a spiritual one, where we must search for an authentic way of living, a way in which we can live true to our essence, rather than simply following what others expect. Heidegger suggests that authenticity is not an easy state to achieve, but rather an ongoing process of self-awareness and self-acceptance. It requires us to face death, and in doing so, death will lead us to true freedom. We are most ourselves when we are aware of our own death. Martin Heidegger, Being in Time. For Heidegger, death is not something to fear or avoid. Rather, it is an integral part of existence. It is the very thing that allows us to realize our finiteness, and from there, it helps us live more fully, more consciously about what truly matters. When we confront death, we can no longer live in falsity in the social roles imposed upon us by others. It is only then that we can find authenticity, living in accordance with ourselves, unbound by the expectations or judgments of society. Heidegger believed that in realizing death, we can find true freedom, freedom in living a life with meaning, with purpose, and living authentically. So, as you lie here in the quiet of the night, reflect on the life you've lived. Have you lived for yourself, or have you only lived to meet the expectations of others? Are you living an authentic life, or are you merely a shadow in the so-called they? Heidegger teaches us that life is not simply existence, but a conscious presence, a mindfulness of each moment we live, and sometimes authentic life only arises when we realize that each moment, each action, each decision brings us closer to the true essence of who we are. When you begin to understand that you are not just part of societal norms, but an independent individual with your own thoughts and choices, you will begin to experience freedom. No longer bound by expectations, no longer chasing after goals that lie outside of yourself. You will find yourself, a person truly living for yourself, living with the values you create for yourself. Heidegger shows that it is precisely in these quiet moments when we face death and our own finiteness that we can live rightly, live meaningfully, and truly live in accordance with ourselves. Imagine that each time you face worries, difficulties in life, you can remind yourself, I live for myself, not for the they out there. This awareness will help you find peace in the challenging days, helping you navigate through trials with steadiness and confidence. As you drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently pass through your mind. Let Heidegger help you realize that only when we face death do we truly live. And in the awareness of death, you will find freedom, peace, and profound tranquility in this life. In the quiet space of the night, when the world outside seems to fall silent and the sounds of life give way to peace, you may feel a vague sense of unease slowly spreading through your mind. Are we living truly for ourselves, or are we merely a shadow in the crowd, just like everyone else? Questions like these might start to emerge in your mind when you seek to quiet yourself, to slow down and reflect on the nature of work, life, and what you give and receive. Karl Marx, the great philosopher and economist, raised deep questions about human life in the modern world. He observed that in the capitalist economic system, Humans have become detached from themselves and the products they create. People no longer work to fulfill their own needs. They simply work to survive in a system where the creativity and meaning of their labor are lost. Marx called this phenomenon alienation, where people no longer feel connected to the products of their labor, no longer feel a part of the work or product they create. The worker becomes all the poorer the more wealth he produces, the more his production increases in power and size. Karl Marx, Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844. In the society Marx described, people are separated from their creative essence. A worker, instead of feeling connected to the product they create, feels alienated from it. They work not out of passion or satisfaction, but simply to make a living. This sense of alienation not only erodes self-awareness, but also disconnects people from their true selves. They become like machines, tools serving an ever-operating economic system that doesn't offer fulfillment or joy. Imagine, each morning, you wake up and begin a new day. You get out of bed, head into work, but within, you feel no joy or excitement. You work for money, for survival, not out of creativity, passion, or the things that truly matter to you. This system, where people must struggle to survive, has made us forget the true value of work, and gradually, we forget ourselves. The more the worker works, the less he owns. In this system, Marx argued, the growth of capital gradually strips away human essence, making people feel alienated from the very work they do. Marx did not only criticize this alienation, he also saw that this very capitalist system was sowing the seeds of its own collapse. When people no longer feel connected to their work, when they are detached from the creative purpose of what they do, when they cannot find value in their actions, they will lose the motivation to maintain an indifferent and oppressive system. Marx believed that once people become aware of their alienation and realize that the system they live in does not bring them freedom or happiness, they would find a way to change it. This leads to a revolution where people will no longer be mere pawns in the hands of capitalism, but will return to their creative, free essence. But when we face these issues in life, we might ask, is change possible? Can we escape this cycle and reconnect with ourselves? The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. This famous quote by Marx emphasizes that only real action, only a genuine transformation in life, can bring true freedom and meaning to human beings. This change does not come from theory. It does not come from empty thoughts, but from actual action, from creating a society where humans are no longer alienated, where work and life are redefined by true values, connecting people with their creative, free essence. And as you lie down, in the quiet of the night, ask yourself, am I living the life I want? Am I doing the things I truly love? Or am I just drifting along in a system with no choice? Sometimes, we need to look back, to reflect on what we are doing, on what we have contributed, to realize that we can change. We can create a life filled with meaning and freedom, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. In this awareness and change, you will reconnect with yourself, with the work and values you pursue. And as you drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently lull you into a dream. Alienation is not an unchangeable fate. It is the result of a system we can transcend, to live an authentic life, a life not bound by things beyond our control, but one that you create, a life that aligns with your essence and values. In the stillness of the night, when everything around you seems to quiet down and the sounds of life give way to peace, you may feel a vague sense of the meaninglessness of life. Sometimes, when you look back at your life, you might feel like a ship without a rudder, drifting in the vast ocean of this world, without a clear purpose, with no bright star to guide you. This feeling, it seems, is an inseparable part of human life, a part of existence that we cannot escape. And it is in these moments that the philosophy of Albert Camus about the absurd and rebellion can offer us a profound awakening, a deeper understanding of how we can live in a world that has no clear meaning. Camus, one of the leading existential philosophers, delved deeply into the sense of absurdity in life. According to him, this universe has no absolute purpose, no eternal order or fairness. We, as humans, search for meaning, but it seems that meaning never comes. It is in confronting this absurdity that Camus posed a question we must all face. Can we find freedom in the meaninglessness of the universe? The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. Camus argued that the meaningless universe is the very foundation on which we must live, but that is not a reason for us to give up or live in despair. On the contrary, it is precisely in this absurdity that we can find freedom. This freedom does not come from changing the world, but from accepting the world as it is, with all its injustices, suffering, and meaninglessness. Rebellion, in Camus's philosophy, is not a violent uprising, but rather an act of continuing to live, an affirmation of our existence even when we know that life has no ultimate purpose. To better understand this view, Camus draws upon the story of Sisyphus in Greek mythology, the man condemned to roll a boulder up a mountain, only for it to roll back down each time he nears the top. The journey of Sisyphus, seemingly, is a perfect symbol for the absurdity of life. We live, we work, we strive, but with no clear result, no ultimate destination. However, Camus does not view Sisyphus's struggle as meaningless. Instead, he sees it as a powerful act of rebellion. Sisyphus does not abandon his task, does not give up in the face of its futility. Instead, each time he pushes the boulder up, he affirms his existence. The struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. With this statement, Camus wants us to realize that it is in the act of living, in facing life and continuing despite knowing its meaninglessness, that we find true value. Life does not need to have a grand purpose. It does not need a perfect conclusion. As long as we continue to live, continue to walk, continue to struggle, even knowing that all our efforts may never reach an end, it is in that very struggle, in each step, each small effort, that we find true freedom. So, in these quiet moments, when you lie down and your eyes begin to close, let these thoughts gently sink into your mind. You may sense that life sometimes feels meaningless, that all your efforts may seem to lead nowhere. But remember that it is precisely in accepting the absurdity of life, in continuing to live even without a clear purpose, that you are finding freedom. You are affirming your existence like Sisyphus, like a person who perseveres relentlessly, despite all conditions. When Camus speaks of the absurd, he is not calling for us to give up. On the contrary, he encourages us to live with the absurd, to live with the meaninglessness of the universe, and in that we will find peace. When there is no absolute purpose, when there is no eternal order, we can create meaning for our lives through each action, each step, and through how we face challenges. In the end, it is the what we do, not the why we do it, that defines us. And as you drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently permeate your mind. Imagine yourself as Sisyphus. Each time you push the boulder to the top, each time you overcome the challenges of life, you find freedom, awareness in that very life. all meaninglessness, all absurdity can become an opportunity for you to affirm your own life, to live more fully in each moment, not because of a noble cause or a final result, but simply because you choose to live. In the stillness of the late night, when everything seems to pause and you begin to sense the peace surrounding you, a profound question may quietly arise in your mind. Am I truly free? Sometimes, amidst the hustle and bustle of life and the daily decisions we make, we may forget that freedom is one of the most essential elements of life, a powerful force we, though unaware, possess. But freedom is not just the right to choose the small things in life. True freedom, as Jean-Paul Sartre pointed out, is absolute freedom, where every action we take defines who we are, where every choice we make is inseparable from responsibility and reflects our very being. Sartre, the renowned French philosopher, introduced a deeply insightful concept of freedom and being. He argued that existence precedes essence, meaning humans are not born with a fixed nature, not with a purpose or fate preordained for them. When you are born, you do not have a predefined role, a set path. Instead, you are a free being, one who can create your essence through each choice you make in life. Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. Jean-Paul Sartre, Being and Nothingness. This may sound heavy, and indeed it is. Sartre did not view freedom as a gift. He saw it as a burden. Absolute freedom is not something simple or easy. It is not an escape from all limitations, but an awareness of everything we do and everything we choose. Because of this, in Sartre's philosophy, each person is responsible for their own life. No one can blame others. No circumstances can be used as excuses. When you make a decision, you're not only deciding for yourself, but for everyone around you, because your actions will always influence the world. Sartre said, "We are our choices. Each choice we make reflects our essence, and in every choice, we create the person we become." Freedom, in Sartre's philosophy, is an immensely powerful force, but also a great pressure. When there is no fixed essence, no eternal meaning other than what we create, we must live in direct confrontation with our own freedom. It is in these moments when you realize you can choose everything, from your work, love, to the simplest everyday matters, that you also feel the weight that comes with that freedom. Freedom is not ease, it is a challenge. When you fully realize that you are solely responsible for everything you do, you will understand that each action is a reflection of your essence, and you are the one who creates it. Living in this absolute freedom, Sartre points out, humans often fall into a state he calls bad faith, self-deception. Bad faith is the state where individuals choose to escape responsibility, to avoid confronting their freedom. When someone does not want to face their own freedom, they begin to live as if they have no choices, as though they are simply a tool in the hands of others or a part of society. They blame circumstances, others, and weaken their own ability to create the life they truly desire. In these moments, they live in bad faith, in self-deception, avoiding the reality that they can change and create a meaningful life. Sartre reminds us that avoiding freedom, avoiding confronting our own responsibility, is an act of evasion. When you deny your freedom, when you live as if you have no right to choose, you not only make life meaningless, but you also rob yourself of true creativity and freedom. When we say that a man chooses himself, we do mean that in choosing for himself, he chooses for all men. Sartre emphasizes that each of our choices is not only a choice for ourselves, but for all of humanity. When you act freely, you're also affirming the value of freedom for everyone. Freedom is not a personal, isolated act, but a connection with everyone else. Because in each free act, we reflect a part of society, a part of humanity. So, as you lie in the stillness of the night, take a moment to reflect on your own freedom. Are you living in absolute freedom? Are you avoiding that freedom, living in the lies you've created for yourself? Only when you dare to confront your freedom, when you dare to choose for yourself without fear, will you truly feel the power of that freedom. It is in this moment, when you realize the weight and beauty of freedom, that you will find peace in your life and no longer fear any choice you make. Let these thoughts gently lull you into sleep. Freedom is not something you need to search for externally. It is an ability you can unlock from within. Choose to live with freedom. Choose to live with the values and choices you create, and you will find that life is full of meaning, even without an eternal essence to define it. It is in this freedom that you will find the peace you have always sought. In the stillness of the night, when everything seems to stop and you begin to feel the peace around you, a profound question may quietly arise in your mind. Am I truly free? Sometimes, in the rush of daily life and the decisions we make, we may forget that freedom is one of the core elements of existence, a great force that we, though not fully aware, possess. But freedom is not just the right to choose the small things in life. True freedom, as Jean-Paul Sartre pointed out, is absolute freedom, where each of our actions defines who we are, where every choice we make is inseparable from responsibility and reflects our very being. Sartre, the famous French philosopher, introduced a deeply insightful concept of freedom in existence. He argued that existence precedes essence, meaning that humans are not born with a fixed nature, nor with a predetermined purpose or fate. When you are born, you do not have a predefined role, nor a set path. Instead, you are a free being, a being who can create your essence through each choice you make in life. Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. Jean-Paul Sartre, Being and Nothingness. This may sound heavy, and indeed it is. Sartre did not view freedom as a gift. He saw it as a burden. Absolute freedom is not something simple or easy. It is not an escape from all limitations, but an awareness of everything we do and every choice we make. Because of this, in Sartre's philosophy, each person is responsible for their own life. No one can blame others. No circumstances can be used as excuses. When you make a decision, you're not only deciding for yourself, but for everyone around you, because your actions will always influence the world. Sartre said, "We are our choices. Each choice we make reflects our essence, and in every choice, we create the person we become." Freedom, in Sartre's philosophy, is an immensely powerful force, but also a great pressure. When there is no fixed essence, no eternal meaning other than what we create, we must live in direct confrontation with our own freedom. It is in these moments when you realize you can choose everything, from your work, love, to the simplest everyday matters, that you also feel the weight that comes with that freedom. Freedom is not ease, it is a challenge. When you fully realize that you are solely responsible for everything you do, you will understand that each action, reflection of your essence, and you are the one who creates it. Living in this absolute freedom, Sartre points out, humans often fall into a state he calls bad faith, self-deception. Bad faith is the state where individuals choose to escape responsibility, to avoid confronting their freedom, When someone does not want to face their own freedom, they begin to live as if they have no choices, as though they are simply a tool in the hands of others or a part of society. They blame circumstances, others, and weaken their own ability to create the life they truly desire. In these moments, they live in bad faith, in self-deception, avoiding the reality that they can change and create a meaningful life. Sartre reminds us that avoiding freedom, avoiding confronting our own responsibility, is an act of evasion. When you deny your freedom, when you live as if you have no right to choose, you not only make life meaningless, but you also rob yourself of true creativity and freedom. When we say that a man chooses himself, we do mean that in choosing for himself, he chooses for all men. Sartre emphasizes that each of our choices is not only a choice for ourselves, but for all of humanity. When you act freely, you are also affirming the value of freedom for everyone. Freedom is not a personal, isolated act, but a connection with everyone else. Because in each free act, we reflect a part of society, a part of humanity. So, as you lie in the stillness of the night, take a moment to reflect on your own freedom. Are you living in absolute freedom? Are you avoiding that freedom, living in the lies you've created for yourself? Only when you dare to confront your freedom, when you dare to choose for yourself without fear, will you truly feel the power of that freedom. It is in this moment, when you realize the weight and beauty of freedom, that you will find peace in your life and no longer fear any choice you make. Let these thoughts gently lull you into sleep. Freedom is not something you need to search for externally. It is an ability you can unlock from within. Choose to live with freedom. Choose to live with the values and choices you create, and you will find that life is full of meaning, even without an eternal essence to define it. It is in this freedom that you will find the peace you have always sought. In the darkness of the night, when everything seems to fall silent, you may begin to feel a vague sense of unease in your mind, as if you are standing before an unavoidable crossroads. This feeling, perhaps, is the darkness within the human soul, where ambiguity and contradiction coexist, pulling us into deep thoughts and sometimes endless internal struggles about the nature of ourselves. We all know that within every human being there is light and darkness, but perhaps we have never truly confronted or acknowledged this contradiction, this constant battle between good and evil within ourselves. Fyodor Dostoevsky, the great Russian writer and philosopher, delved deeply into the hidden corners of the human soul. He realized that within the nature of mankind, there is an inseparable contradiction. While we long for absolute freedom, that very freedom can push us into the depths of sin and despair. Human beings, according to Dostoevsky, are not simply pure creatures, but exist with both light and darkness, both the longing for salvation and the temptation of sin. Man is what he makes of himself. Fyodor Dostoevsky, Notes from Underground. Dostoevsky saw within humanity a powerful struggle between noble aspirations and base desires. We desire absolute freedom, but within that very freedom, we encounter moral collapse, the abandonment of ethical values. Freedom is the right to choose your own slavery. Indeed, freedom, according to Dostoevsky, is a double-edged sword. We can choose to be free, but that very freedom forces us to face unforeseeable consequences, making it impossible to escape the guilt or emptiness that it brings. In his novel, Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky portrays a character living in absolute isolation and despair, a person constantly searching for a reason to exist in a meaningless world. This character, instead of seeking meaning in life, chooses separation and wallows in negative thoughts, in self-destruction. For Dostoevsky, the absolute freedom that humans crave is sometimes the path to destruction. When people abandon limitations, when they abandon moral values, they confront a fragmentation of the soul, and ultimately, this freedom becomes a burden. You may wonder, can humanity truly be free? Is freedom the key to happiness, or is it merely the trap we create for ourselves? Dostoevsky shows us that, while we may choose freedom, that very choice pushes us into dead ends that we cannot escape. Once human beings are granted absolute freedom, they must face the task of defining the values and meaning of life, something that is not always easy. In this freedom, humans can get lost, they can fall, and they can lose themselves in life. Freedom is not worth having if it does not include the freedom to make mistakes. And it is through making mistakes, through committing wrongs, that humans truly learn the value of freedom. Dostoevsky teaches us that life is not always easy or beautiful, but it is precisely in these contradictions, in the painful choices we must face, that we find our true essence. Freedom is not something humans can easily control, and this freedom, if left unchecked and unexamined, can become an abyss. Only by confronting our own darkness, with our mistakes and sins, can we find the light of redemption, of salvation. The greatest happiness is to know the source of unhappiness. Fyodor Dostoevsky, the brothers Karamazov. When you begin to recognize that within each of us there is a dark side, a side of guilt, a side of weakness, you will be able to understand and empathize with your own flaws. Those moments when you feel not strong enough, those times when you stumble, are actually the moments you can see your human nature more clearly than ever before. It is in those painful moments that you can learn and grow, finding new strength to continue, to stand up, and to keep moving forward. So, as you lie down and feel the peace surrounding you, let Dostoevsky's questions gently echo in your mind. Let these contradictions become a part of your journey of self-reflection about freedom and about the decisions you have made and will continue to make in life. Do not fear the darkness within you, for it is in that darkness that you can find the light. Only by acknowledging and confronting the darkness can you uncover the good that you never realized was there. And as you drift into sleep, let these thoughts continue to gently embrace you, like soft waves. Humanity is a contradiction, between light and darkness, between sin and redemption. But it is in these contradictions that we find our true nature, and from there, we live a life full of meaning. In the stillness of the late night, when everything seems to fall quiet and you begin to sense the peace around you, you may find yourself asking, do I truly understand all that I'm saying? Can the language, the words I use every day, really express the full depth of my thoughts and feelings? These questions may not have easy answers, but they reflect a profound part of our existence. Language, the tool we use daily to communicate and understand the world, contains limitations that we may not always be aware of. Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, spent much of his life exploring the nature of language and its limitations in expressing and understanding the world. He pointed out that language is not merely a tool for exchanging information, but it is the way in which we construct our world. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. This statement by Wittgenstein is not simply an observation about the constraints of language, but a deep reminder of how we perceive and interact with the world around us. According to Wittgenstein, each person's world is not an objective reality, but one that is created through language, through the concepts and definitions we assign to the objects and phenomena around us. Imagine sitting in a dark room with a painting of a landscape before you. You may describe the scenery with specific words, but how can you fully express the emotions you feel when looking at that painting? How can you describe the colors, the light, the atmosphere, and the feelings the painting evokes with precision through language? Language, though powerful and versatile, cannot fully capture such vivid and deep experiences. We can only describe a small part of the world through words, and those words create a world of their own, one that each of us can only understand in our own unique way. This is why Wittgenstein argued, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." If there are things that language cannot express, it is better for us to remain silent, rather than attempt to say what cannot be grasped by language. This leads us to question the limits of knowledge and perception. Could it be that everything we understand about the world is shaped by language? Can we ever truly know things that lie beyond the capacity of language to describe? Those deep emotions and experiences that cannot be articulated in words. Wittgenstein did not claim that language is useless, but he emphasized that language can only help us understand a fraction of the world. It cannot encompass the totality of reality. When we speak of things that cannot be expressed through language, we can only feel them. We cannot describe or analyze them accurately. It is in that silence, in what cannot be expressed, that we may find the truth about the nature of the world. This also reflects a deep truth about ourselves, how we perceive the world. Language can help us connect, but it can also create limitations in how we understand and communicate. It is in the moments of stillness, when no words are left to say, that we can truly perceive the deep things that language cannot reach. And this is the paradox that Wittgenstein wanted us to recognize. We create our world through language, but it is also language that creates the boundaries we cannot surpass. As you slowly drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently settle in your subconscious. Remember that every word, every concept you use to understand the world is only a part of reality, a way in which you try to express what you feel. However, there are things that language cannot grasp, and it is in those places that true understanding exists. In the silence, in the moments when we do not need to say anything, only to feel. Wittgenstein shows us that when confronted with things that cannot be expressed in words, we must learn to listen, to feel the deep things that cannot be explained by reason or language. It is in that silence that we find the peace and the deepest understanding of the world and ourselves. And as you drift into sleep, let your mind find peace in these thoughts. Language may create our world, but there are things, emotions, and experiences that can only be deeply felt within. Let the stillness of this night help you understand that sometimes what remains unsaid is the most profound, and in that silence, you will find the tranquility that you seek. In the quiet of the night, when you begin to feel the gentle spread of fatigue in your body, you may ask yourself, do I truly understand all that I am saying? Can the language, the words I use every day, truly express the full depth of my thoughts and feelings? These questions may not have easy answers, but they reflect a profound part of our lives. Language, the tool we use daily to communicate and understand the world, contains limitations that we are not always aware of. Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, spent much of his life exploring the nature of language and its limitations in expressing and understanding the world. He pointed out that language is not merely a tool for exchanging information, but it is the way in which we construct our world. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. This statement by Wittgenstein is not simply an observation about the constraints of language, but a deep reminder of how we perceive and interact with the world around us. According to Wittgenstein, each person's world is not an objective reality, but one that is created through language, through the concepts and definitions we assign to the objects and phenomena around us. Imagine sitting in a dark room with a painting of a landscape before you. You may describe the scenery with specific words, but how can you fully express the emotions you feel when looking at that painting? How can you describe the colors, the light, the atmosphere, and the feelings the painting evokes with precision through language? Language, though powerful and versatile, cannot fully capture such vivid and deep experiences. We can only describe a small part of the world through words, and those words create a world of their own, one that each of us can only understand in our own unique way. This is why Wittgenstein argued, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." If there are things that language cannot express, it is better for us to remain silent rather than attempt to say what cannot be grasped by language. This leads us to question the limits of knowledge and perception. Could it be that everything we understand about the world is shaped by language? Can we ever truly know things that lie beyond the capacity of language to describe? Those deep emotions and experiences that cannot be articulated in words. Wittgenstein did not claim that language is useless, but he emphasized that language can only help us understand a fraction of the world. It cannot encompass the totality of reality. When we speak of things that cannot be expressed through language, we can only feel them. We cannot describe or analyze them accurately. It is in that silence, in what cannot be expressed, that we may find the truth about the nature of the world. This also reflects a deep truth about ourselves, how we perceive the world. Language can help us connect, but it can also create limitations in how we understand and communicate. It is in the moments of stillness, when no words are left to say, that we can truly perceive the deep things that language cannot reach. And this is the paradox that Wittgenstein wanted us to recognize. We create our world through language, but it is also language that creates the boundaries we cannot surpass. As you slowly drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently settle in your subconscious. Remember that every word, every concept you use to understand the world is only a part of reality, a way in which you try to express what you feel. However, there are things that language cannot grasp, and it is in those places that true understanding exists. In the silence, or in the moments when we do not need to say anything, only to feel. Wittgenstein shows us that, when confronted with things that cannot be expressed in words, we must learn to listen, to feel the deep things that cannot be explained by reason or language. It is in that silence that we find the peace and the deepest understanding of the world and ourselves. And as you drift into sleep, let your mind find peace in these thoughts. Language may create our world, but there are things, emotions, and experiences that can only be deeply felt within. Let the stillness of this night help you understand that sometimes what remains unsaid is the most profound, and in that silence, you will find the tranquility that you seek. In the stillness of the late night, when everything seems to quiet down and you begin to feel the peace around you, a thought may gently cross your mind. Who am I? This simple yet profound question can draw you into a deep internal journey full of contradictions and discovery. Have you ever felt that you are a fixed being with attributes, qualities, and an unchanging identity? Or have you come to realize that in every passing moment, you are constantly changing, evolving, and becoming someone new, never quite the same as the person you were in the past? This sense of identity, this constant flow of the soul and life, is what philosopher Gilles Deleuze explored deeply in his studies. Deleuze did not believe in a fixed, unchanging self as we often think. Instead, he argued that identity is a network of flows, always in the process of becoming. Each of us, every thought, every feeling, every action, is part of a continuous process of change, never static, never finished. Deleuze asserted that identity is not a static entity, but something that is always becoming, always evolving, always moving forward, like an endless flow that cannot stop, cannot be fixed. Becoming is the movement of the world, the movement of thought. When you think about yourself, do you ever feel that you cannot fully define who you are? Have you ever noticed that what you believed about yourself yesterday has changed today? Your thoughts, emotions, and perspectives continuously change, constantly evolving and expanding. You yourself are this process, and in this becoming, you are never truly a fixed self, but always a part of an endless flow. Deleuze invites us to move beyond rigid models of identity and recognize that we are not beings with an essence, but rather events, possibilities, and continuous variations. Every moment, every action, every choice you make is part of the ongoing process of becoming, and it is this process that constitutes your identity. We are not fixed individuals, but beings that are always changing, always opening new possibilities. It is this very change that makes us who we are, that defines life and the path we walk. However, this is not always easy. In the modern world, we often get caught in definitions of ourselves, forced to play roles in the eyes of society, in relationships, and in our work. We are limited by the roles that society assigns to us, and sometimes we deceive ourselves into thinking that these are the things we must become. But when we realize that identity is not something fixed, but a continuous process of change, we will realize that we can change. We can become a new version of ourselves at any time. It is this freedom in the process of becoming that brings us peace and liberation. When Deleuze talks about becoming, he is not just referring to changes on the outside, but to a profound transformation within the mind and life of each person. This process is not merely an outward change. It is a breaking of systems, a liberation from the prejudices, from the rigid patterns that society or even ourselves have imposed. Deleuze's thought encourages us to constantly seek new ways of living, thinking, and perceiving the world. The process of becoming is not just about external change, but about the inner recreation of oneself, the ability to open new doors in the soul, in consciousness, in how we connect with the world. Imagine you are stepping through a gate where all definitions of yourself are dismantled. You're no longer a fixed version of yourself, but a constantly changing being, endlessly learning and evolving. It is in this becoming that you find freedom. Freedom is not the breaking of all limits, but the ability to choose freely, to live according to values and thoughts that you select, not bound by predetermined patterns. As you lie down in the stillness of the night, let the thoughts about this becoming gently flow through your mind. You do not need to be a fixed person. You do not need to live according to predefined definitions. You can be a changing being, an entity that continually develops and explores yourself through every step, every choice. It is in this change that you will find the peace and freedom you seek. To become is to create new possibilities. Gilles Deleuze, 1,000 Plateaus. Let these thoughts gently lull you into sleep, like an endless, unceasing flow that leads you into a new world, where you are not only what you have been and are, but all that you can become. In this becoming, you will find yourself in moments of freedom and endless discovery. In the stillness of the night, when you begin to sense the peace around you, a thought may quietly arise in your mind. Am I truly seeing reality as it is? Sometimes, amidst the hustle and bustle of life, we may forget that what we understand about the world about language and the nature of everything around us is not fixed or certain. Perhaps throughout life, we have grown accustomed to believing in definitions, in words that seem certain, as though they represent absolute truths. But when we stop and reflect, we may realize that there are things that cannot easily be expressed, things that cannot be confined to specific concepts. And this is precisely what philosopher Jean Baudrillard pointed out in his theory of hyperreality and simulation. Baudrillard, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, explored a radically different view of language and meaning. He argued that there is no fixed meaning, no absolute definition in the world. Every system of language, every symbol, every expression contains inherent fractures, where meaning is always open to new interpretations, always changing, and cannot be confined to any framework. There is nothing outside of the text. This famous quote by Baudrillard opens up a profound understanding of how we perceive and interact with the world. According to him, everything is constructed from language, and though language is powerful, it can never fully grasp the truth. As you continue to relax and feel the stillness around you, imagine that everything you see, feel, and think about the world is expressed through words, through language. Every definition, every concept you use to understand the world is part of a linguistic system that we have learned and accepted from society, history, and others. But Baudrillard points out that this system is not a permanent or complete entity. Every word, every concept, every image contains a slippage of meaning, an endless expansion that we cannot fully grasp. Language is not merely a tool to reflect reality. It also creates reality, and in that act of expression, it opens up countless possibilities for interpretation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1, the Bible. The opening verse of the Gospel of John affirms the crucial role of language in creating the world. However, Baudrillard would argue that language is not a single truth that we must passively accept. Instead, language is a continuous process of slippage, where every word and concept can open up new understandings, new meanings that we have never thought of. This can make it difficult for us to define truth, because every time we try to define something, we discover that those definitions also carry uncertainty, ambiguity. Baudrillard goes even further by saying that every system of knowledge contains an inherent fracture, meaning that they always contain contradictions, gaps, things that cannot fully align. The systems of language, culture, religion, or society in which we live, though seemingly solid, cannot avoid these gaps, these absences that no one can fully fill. Every system contains limits that cannot be surpassed, and within these very limits, new opportunities for understanding and new interpretations arise. You may have experienced moments when you thought you understood something clearly, but when you begin to express it, you realize that your words cannot fully capture the emotions, feelings, or thoughts you have. We try to use words to express what we feel, but in the process, the meaning of those words shifts, revealing layers that we could not foresee. This is the slippage of meaning Baudrillard describes, that in language, nothing is fixed, nothing is absolute. Every word carries within it uncertainty, ambiguity that we cannot control. But it is precisely in this ambiguity, in the fracture of the language system, that we find freedom. Because language is not an absolute tool to control the world, but a way for us to explore and understand it. When we realize that every definition carries with it the potential for change, we also realize that we, with our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, are not fixed beings. We too are in a state of becoming, in a continuous process of change and transformation, just like the language we use to describe the world. In this stillness, when you begin to feel the uncertainty and ambiguity of the world, you will notice a profound peace. Every word, every thought carries within it infinite expansion, and it is in that expansion that you will find freedom, creativity, and healing. Do not fear the ambiguity, do not fear the uncertainty, for it is in that very space that you will find opportunities to explore new depths in yourself and the world around you. And as you begin to drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently flow through your mind, like waves washing over the shore. Let the slippage, the infinite expansion of language and meaning guide you into a deep sleep, where you no longer have to seek an absolute truth, but simply feel and live in the ambiguity of this world. In that uncertainty, you will find the peace, the freedom, and the healing that you seek. In the stillness of the night, when you feel the peace surrounding you, a thought may quietly drift through your mind. Does life truly have meaning? There are moments when you may feel as though you are living in a dream, in an ambiguous reality where everything can change in an instant, and what you believe to be true may turn out to be an illusion. But can you live with this uncertainty? Can you accept that reality is not something fixed, but just a part of an endless flow, where reality and illusion merge into one? These are the questions that Zhuangzi, one of the great philosophers of ancient China, posed thousands of years ago. In his works, Zhuangzi shared a profound view on reality and illusion. He believed that life, like a dream, is a continuous process of change impossible to fully grasp. One of his most famous stories is that of the butterfly dream, in which Zhuangzi recounts a strange dream. He dreams that he becomes a butterfly, flying freely in the colorful gardens. When he wakes up, he is no longer sure if he is Zhuangzi dreaming he is a butterfly, or if he is a butterfly dreaming he is Zhuangzi, and in that moment he realizes that perhaps everything in life is like a dream, an illusion that we can never be certain about. I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I'm a man. Zhuangzi, the Zhuangzi. This statement by Zhuangzi opens up a deep perspective on reality and illusion. It reminds us that, in this life, everything is subject to change, to transformation, and we can never truly know if what we perceive is truly real. Reality is not something fixed, it is a process of continual change. Each passing moment, each experience, each thought can lead us into another world, another reality, where we might be a butterfly flying in a garden or a man awake in the world. Every state, every perception of the self can change in an instant, and this is part of the mystery of life. Zhuangzi invites us to live like butterflies in our dreams, not bound by rigid definitions, not trying to control everything in life. Life is not a battle to find absolute truth or eternal purpose. Instead, Zhuangzi encourages us to live naturally, to live gently, without forcing ourselves into predefined patterns. The naturalness in Zhuangzi's philosophy is not about ignoring responsibilities or goals, but about living in harmony with the nature of the world, with the natural flow of the universe, and not intervening too forcefully. When we live naturally, as Zhuangzi advises, we are no longer bound by societal norms or the expectations of others. We no longer feel the tension when facing challenges. Instead, we learn to let things flow gently, like water meandering with the wind, like the waves gently lapping against the shore. We no longer force ourselves to achieve goals that we may not truly desire. Instead, we find peace in accepting and living in accordance with our true nature. Like Zhuangzi's butterfly dream, when you realize that life is not a fixed reality but a series of movements, you'll gradually understand that ease is the key to happiness. It is not always necessary to struggle or force everything to conform to our will. Sometimes, true happiness comes from living in harmony with the universe, living naturally as it is, and allowing things to come and go with the flow of life. So, as you lie down tonight, let Zhuangzi's thoughts gently permeate your mind. You don't have to be someone special. You don't have to achieve all the goals set by society. You only need to be yourself, live naturally, without forcing or straining. The world is the way it is, and we are just a part of it. Everything, every event in life has its own natural flow, and we cannot control it all. But in accepting the impermanence, accepting the uncertainty of life, you will find peace and true freedom. With these thoughts, as you begin to drift into sleep, let them gently soothe your soul. Let yourself be free like a butterfly in a dream, not bound by fixed things, but living in the becoming, in the ever-changing flow of the world and your own self. It is in this ambiguity, in this uncertainty, that you will find absolute freedom. In the stillness of the night, when everything around you seems to quiet down and you begin to sense the peace surrounding you, you may wonder, what is true happiness? In a world filled with dazzling images, grand goals, and unending societal expectations, we may sometimes forget that happiness is not a distant destination, not material possessions or fleeting pleasures. There is a simple, gentle yet profoundly deep philosophy that Epicurus, an ancient Greek philosopher, left for us. Happiness comes from simplicity. Epicurus, in his works, was not just a philosopher but a guide on how to live rightly, a teacher who pointed out that true happiness does not lie in distant desires or in the pursuit of excessive pleasures. According to Epicurus, happiness comes from simple things, from the basic gifts life provides, like friends, bread, water, and peace of mind. Not what we have, but what we enjoy constitutes our abundance. This famous quote by Epicurus reminds us that the true value of life is not in what we own, but in what we truly enjoy and appreciate. In the modern world, where we all race against time, career ambitions, and endless desires, Epicurus offers a powerful piece of advice. Learn to find happiness in the smallest things. It is not in lavish parties, not in grand achievements, but in the quiet and peaceful moments, in the simple joys we can enjoy every day. Sometimes, happiness is simply sitting with close friends, enjoying a modest meal, or feeling the tranquility of the soul after a long day. The greatest wealth is to live content with little. Epicurus' letter to Menoxius. This quote by Epicurus is perhaps the most profound reminder of the true nature of happiness. When we no longer chase illusions of wealth or grand success, when we no longer yearn for distant and complicated goals, happiness comes naturally. We simply need to live simply, to live with what we have and appreciate the value in each moment. Happiness is not a race to possess material things or achieve unreachable goals, but the ability to enjoy the peace in our current life, in the humble things life offers us. Imagine, on a quiet morning, when you wake up and look outside the window, you see the sun rise. You feel the warm light of the new day, but do you realize that these images are not absolute truths, but simulations of nature? The sun doesn't shine directly on you. Those rays must pass through the atmosphere, through layers of air you cannot see, to reach you. Similarly, everything you see in life, from relationships, work, to everyday experiences, is only a simulation of more complex realities. things that you cannot fully grasp. When you lie down, let these thoughts gently flow through your mind. Happiness is not in what you achieve or possess, but in your gratitude and appreciation for the simplest things in life. You can find happiness right here, in this very moment, if only you know how to relax and allow your soul to find peace in the small things around you. And as you drift into sleep, let these thoughts continue to soothe you, like gentle waves in the night, helping you step into a deep, peaceful sleep, filled with serenity. It is not length of life, but depth of life. Epicurus' Principal Doctrines. This quote by Epicurus highlights another important aspect of his philosophy. Happiness is not about living long, but living deeply, living fully. Often, we place too much focus on what we can achieve, on the great accomplishments we can gain in life. But according to Epicurus, the truth is simple. Happiness comes from living fully, from understanding and deeply experiencing what we already have, rather than endlessly chasing after distant, unreachable things. As you begin to drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently embrace you. Remember, happiness is not in what you gain or possess, but in how you appreciate and feel the value in the simplest things life offers. You can experience happiness right now, in this moment, simply by relaxing and allowing your soul to find peace in the small, everyday gifts around you. As you lie down in the stillness of the night, with a sense of peace surrounding you, you may find yourself pondering a profound question. What is the true nature of humanity? In this world, with its constant conflicts, disagreements, and divisions, do we not seem to be constantly drawn into contradictions, into confrontation and conflict with those around us? What drives humanity to act this way? These questions may lead you into deep reflection on the nature of humanity, about the latent factors within each of us that can push us into chaos. And perhaps, in these moments, the philosophy of Thomas Hobbes will offer you a fresh perspective on the nature of society, of humanity, and of the conflicts we must face. Thomas Hobbes, one of the greatest philosophers of the 17th century, became famous for his concept of the war of all against all in nature. He argued that, in the natural state with no external control, humans would live in constant conflict. The life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. This famous quote from Hobbes in his work, Leviathan, reflects a very pessimistic view of human nature where there is no law, no powerful authority to control us. Hobbes believed that, without being bound by rules and order, human instincts would drive us to compete for power, wealth, and survival. The absence of a governing mechanism or protection would plunge humanity into chaos, where life would be full of fear, violence, and disorder. This may make you feel confused. Are we, as human beings, truly just natural creatures, driven by uncontrollable instincts? Is the nature of humanity truly a ceaseless struggle, a never-ending battle? Hobbes argued that, in absolute freedom, each individual will act for their own benefit without caring for others, and this leads to conflict. But Hobbes also pointed out that, to avoid chaos and maintain peaceful existence, we must create a Leviathan school, an absolute power, a strong state to regulate and control human actions, to protect life and maintain the stability of society. Covenants without the sword are but words and have no strength to secure a man at all. Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan. According to Hobbes, only when humans surrender power to a strong institution, a Leviathan, can they live in peace without the fear of constant conflict. Leviathan is not just a political power, it symbolizes order, protection, and control. Without this power, humans would return to their primal instincts and society would once again fall into chaos. For Hobbes, the Leviathan is essential to preserve social stability, ensuring that people live within a common framework, free from unnecessary wars and conflicts. When reflecting on Hobbes, we can see that in the modern world, although we no longer live in the conditions Hobbes described, the nature of humanity, with its inherent conflicts and struggles for power, still persists. The ongoing conflicts in modern society, whether small or large, still reflect aspects of the natural war Hobbes described. And although we now have legal mechanisms and social rules to regulate and mediate behavior, the existence of a Leviathan, a strong power to maintain peace, remains crucial to ensuring the stability of society. So, as you lie in the stillness of this night, reflect on what Hobbes said about human nature. Are we truly free in this society, or are we simply living in an ongoing battle, bound by external rules and control? Perhaps the answer is not a simple choice between freedom and order, but an awareness of the role of power and order in our lives. We cannot live entirely free without constraints, but we also cannot live entirely under control without freedom. Let these thoughts gently permeate your mind as you begin to drift into sleep. Remember that in understanding human nature, in recognizing the necessity of order and power to maintain peace, you will find peace in your own life. We may find freedom not by eliminating power, but by acknowledging it and living within a system of order, a system that protects us from chaos. As you lie down in the stillness of the night, with a sense of peace surrounding you, you may find yourself pondering a profound question. What is true freedom? In a world full of dazzling images, grand goals, and endless societal expectations, we sometimes forget that freedom is not a distant destination, nor is it material possessions or fleeting pleasures. There is a simple yet profound philosophy left for us by John Locke, the father of natural rights theory and limited government. True happiness and freedom come from simplicity. Locke, a 17th century English philosopher, contributed foundational ideas to modern political theory, particularly with his views on natural rights and the role of limited government. He believed that humans, from birth, possess inherent, inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and property. These are natural rights that every person is born with, and no one, including the government, can take them away. Every man has a property in his own person. This nobody has a right to but himself. This famous quote by Locke emphasizes that each individual has the right to own themselves, to have control over their life and property without interference. In a natural state, where there is no formal government, every individual has the right to defend their life, liberty, and property by any means necessary. However, as society develops, these rights may be threatened, which is why humans need to establish a government, not to rule over them, but to protect their natural rights. Locke argued that governments exist solely to protect these basic rights, not to impose power or control over people's lives. A government, according to Locke, must be a creation of the people's consent, and its power must always be limited. The end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. John Locke, Second Treatise of Government. This quote from Locke affirms that the purpose of law and government is not to restrict freedom, but to protect and enhance it. Governments should not have absolute power, but must act to ensure that every citizen can exercise their freedom in a society that is fair and just. A government must be built upon the consent of the governed, with a clear, fair system of rules that limit the power of the ruler. Locke believed that, in the natural state, people could live peacefully and freely as long as they respected each other's rights. But governments are necessary to resolve disputes, protect property, and maintain social order. However, the power of the government can only exist when it is delegated by the people and when it acts in the public's interest, not for personal gain or the benefit of any one group. If a government abuses its power, it is considered illegitimate, and the people have the right to resist or replace it. Reflecting on Locke's philosophy, we realize that true freedom is not a privilege granted to us by the government. It is an inherent right we have from the moment we are born. The government can only exist if it respects and protects this freedom. Government is not about domination, but protection. It is like a shield, guarding us against infringements on our individual rights, either by the state or by other individuals in society. For this reason, freedom is not just the right to do whatever we wish, but the right to live in a society where the rights of each individual are protected and treated fairly. In the quiet of the night, as you drift towards sleep, let these thoughts gently settle in your mind. You may realize that, in this life, freedom is not just about doing whatever we want, but about living in a society where the rights of each individual are protected, where the government exists to maintain fairness and order. The rights to life, liberty, and property are fundamental rights that no one can take away, and government only exists to protect these rights. When you realize this, you will feel a sense of peace, for you understand that freedom is not something distant or abstract, but a core part of human nature, and that government is merely a tool to protect it, not to impose upon us. As you gradually drift into sleep, let these thoughts sink deeper into your mind. You can feel that, in a society where everyone is granted the right to live freely, and where the government exists to protect these fundamental rights, we will find peace, not in fear or control, but in the respect and protection of each person's freedom. As you lie in the stillness of the night, with peace surrounding you, a profound question may gently arise in your mind. What is the true nature of humanity? In a world filled with constant pressures, societal norms, and unrelenting expectations from all directions, have we lost touch with our true essence? Are we truly living in genuine freedom, or are we merely slaves, bound by the very rules that society has imposed upon us? Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the greatest philosophers of the 18th century, offered deep reflections on freedom and human nature in society. He believed that humans are born good, but society has corrupted them, turning them into slaves to themselves. Rousseau pointed out something crucial in his works: the social contract and discourse on the origin and basis of inequality among men. That in the natural state, humans are free, living in harmony with nature, unaffected by greed or power. However, once humans begin to live in society, when they are confronted with conventions and laws, society chains their freedom and causes them to lose their original nature. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, The Social Contract. This famous quote by Rousseau is a powerful reminder of the contradiction in human life. We are born free, unbound by anything, but as we enter society, we become slaves to the very rules that society sets. These rules, these societal norms, do not always bring freedom to humanity. On the contrary, they strip away the inherent freedom of each individual, making humans dependent on what Rousseau calls the general will of society, the shared values and directions that everyone must follow. This does not mean Rousseau rejected the role of society or government. He did not call for the dismantling of societal order, but pointed out that it is the very institutions and power structures of society that turn humans, once free beings, into slaves. Society has transformed human freedom into obligations, responsibilities, and coercions, making them do things they do not truly wish to do. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. It is within society where people start to share property, power, and interests that they lose their freedom, no longer being themselves, but parts of a larger social body, where every action is regulated. But Rousseau did not just criticize society. He also proposed a solution to this problem. In The Social Contract, he introduced the idea of the general will, a form of government where people can live in freedom and equality, where each individual has a say in creating the rules and laws. For Rousseau, freedom does not mean the absence of laws, but the freedom to participate in the creation of society where everyone is free and equal in determining the societal rules they will follow. So, as you drift into sleep tonight, perhaps these thoughts about freedom and society will gently pass through your mind. Are you also living in the chains of society, bound by things you did not choose but must obey? Or do you feel the freedom in your life, in how you choose to live, and in the decisions you make every day? Perhaps the answer is not simply a choice between freedom and order, but an awareness of the role of power and order in our lives. We cannot live completely free without some form of constraint, but we also cannot live fully in control without freedom. The social contract is not a contract between man and man, but a contract between man and society. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, The Social Contract. Rousseau believed that when humans enter into society, they must accept a common agreement where every individual has both rights and responsibilities in creating and maintaining social order. However, he also warned that if society is not based on true equality and freedom, if individuals do not truly participate in this process, then society becomes a web of chains where people are deprived of their freedom. And only in rebuilding and renewing this social awareness can humans find true freedom. Thus, when you reflect on Rousseau's thoughts, you may realize that true freedom is not about doing whatever you want, but about being able to choose consciously and wisely in life. Freedom is not about disregarding order, but about participating in the creation of that order. When you live in a society where everyone is equal and can decide what is best for the community, you will find peace in your soul. So, as you lie down and prepare to drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently seep into your mind. Remember, true freedom is not about doing what you want, but about living in a world where you can live freely, without suffering from invisible chains imposed by society. When you find freedom within yourself, you will find a space for peace, for authentic living, unbound by external rules or expectations. As you lie in the stillness of the night, with a sense of calm surrounding you, you may find yourself noticing a profound silence, as though you are facing a truth beyond the ordinary thoughts and emotions. At times, in these quiet moments, you may feel the presence of a larger question. Is suffering an essential part of the journey to finding the truth? This is not an easy question to answer, but it leads us to one of the deepest philosophies of Simone Weil, a French philosopher and theologian who dedicated her life to exploring suffering, the presence of others, and how we can truly understand the world through these challenging experiences. Simone Weil was not a philosopher seeking comfort or ease in life. On the contrary, she viewed suffering as a pathway, a means to a deeper understanding of the nature of humanity and the world. For her, suffering was not merely something to avoid, but an inseparable part of the search for truth. This perspective of Simone Weil carries a gentle yet profound power, a view that leads us to see suffering as part of spiritual awakening rather than just something negative or painful. She believed that only by confronting suffering, by feeling pain in ourselves and in others, can we truly understand and grasp the truth about humanity and the universe. Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Simone Weil, Gravity and Grace. In Gravity and Grace, Simone Weil pointed out that attention, a deep understanding of the world and those around us, is one of the highest forms of generosity a person can offer. It is through this attention, through the ability to feel the pain of others, that we can reach true understanding. Well argued that philosophy is not just abstract theory or reasoning, but the ability to perceive suffering and the presence of others. Only in empathy, in the capacity to understand and feel the pain of others, do we find the path to truth, to awakening to the nature of humanity. Suffering, according to Simone Weil, is not something we can easily overcome or eliminate, but something we must learn to live with, to face and feel. When we allow ourselves to feel pain, not only our own, but also that of others, we open our hearts and minds, ready to confront the deepest aspects of life. She emphasized that while society often teaches us to seek comfort and avoid suffering, suffering itself is an opportunity for us to open up and understand deeper truths. We cannot think of a society without pain. When we view suffering as a part of life, we realize that it is within suffering that we find the strength to change, to expand ourselves, and to gain a deeper understanding of the world and of ourselves. When facing our own pain or witnessing the pain of others, we may feel a sense of helplessness, an inexplicable feeling of being lost. But it is precisely in these moments when you stop and truly feel that you will see that attention, listening and understanding what others are going through, can bring healing and deep understanding. This attention is not mere concern, but a deep focus on the pain, on the existence of others, not to solve it immediately, but to empathize, to allow yourself to feel and understand. As you lie here, in the stillness of the night, let these thoughts gently enter your mind. Can you view suffering as part of the path to truth? Can you allow yourself to feel the pain, not only of yourself, but of others? When you understand that suffering is not something to be avoided, but a means to awaken, you will see that you can live a deeper life, a life filled with empathy and a clearer understanding of truth in all circumstances. To be in love is to be in a state of grace. Simone Weil, Gravity and Grace. As you gradually sink into sleep, let these thoughts bring you into a peaceful space where suffering is no longer a burden, but part of healing. When you recognize the presence of pain, not only in yourself, but in those around you, you will begin to feel a deep connection with the world, with yourself, and with others. It is in these moments, in the empathy and understanding of suffering, that you will find peace within your soul and realize that suffering, though an unavoidable part of life, can also be the path that leads us to truth, to peace within. Let these thoughts gently guide you into sleep, in calm and tranquility. As you fall asleep, remember that understanding suffering may be the key to opening your heart, to living a life not just of avoidance, but of acceptance, feeling, and healing. In the stillness of the night, when all the sounds of the world fade away and you begin to feel the peace enveloping you, you may sense a subtle anxiety creeping into your mind. Is life truly always easy? At times, we may feel as though we are standing at the edge of an abyss, uncertain of where to step, unsure how to move forward. We feel fear, anxiety, and sometimes despair, as if every choice before us is shrouded in uncertainty, with no clear way out. These moments may give us the feeling that life is a meaningless journey without a clear purpose. Yet, it is precisely in these challenging moments that the philosophy of Søren Kierkegaard, On the Leap of Faith, can offer us a new path to understand life and overcome anxiety. Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher, was the first to offer a profound philosophical approach to anxiety and despair, and how humans can transcend them through an act of faith. He saw that the essence of being human is anxiety, because we are faced with absolute freedom, with infinite choices in life, and this sometimes leaves us feeling lost. But for Kierkegaard, anxiety and despair are not emotions to be avoided, but are integral to the spiritual journey of humanity. It is precisely through facing these feelings that humans can develop, find the truth about themselves, and discover their deeper nature. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Søren Kierkegaard, The Concept of Anxiety. This quote by Kierkegaard describes anxiety as a feeling that arises when we are confronted with absolute freedom. When nothing is certain, when there is no clear path, we feel overwhelmed by our own freedom. This is the anxiety Kierkegaard speaks of, when we realize that we can do anything, but at the same time, we must bear the responsibility for the choices we make. It is in this overwhelming feeling that we face a profound question. Can I live with this freedom, or will I allow fear to control me? Kierkegaard does not suggest that we avoid anxiety or despair, but he argues that we must leap into faith to overcome them. For him, faith is not an easy state, but a leap, a daring decision, a choice made in ambiguity and uncertainty. Faith is the highest passion. To Kierkegaard, faith is a powerful act, a commitment that is not based on reason or empirical evidence, but simply a choice of the heart. It is a leap into the unknown, into the uncertainty of life, and it is in that leap that we find salvation. When you live in a world where everything can change, when you cannot control what happens, you will inevitably feel caught in a sense of unavoidable anxiety. But it is precisely in this anxiety, in the moments when you feel helpless and unsure of what to do, that you need to leap into faith. You may not know what will come, but you can choose to trust in a greater strength, trust in yourself and the values you hold dear. When you face uncertainty, you will realize that only faith can bring peace to your soul. Faith, according to Kierkegaard, is not a vague or shallow belief. It is a deep commitment, a bold act of the heart and soul, a decision that cannot be explained by reason, but one that you know is the only path to peace in life. To be in despair is to be in a situation where we lose our identity in the world. When you fall into despair, when you feel you can no longer define who you are in this world, you must choose faith. It is in faith that you will find yourself again. Find a path to continue, a purpose to keep living. So, as you lie in the quiet of this night, let the thoughts of leaping into faith sink gently into your mind. You may feel anxious, uncertain about the future, but it is precisely in that uncertainty that you can choose faith. You can trust in your values, trust in your ability to change, trust in an invisible strength that will guide you through challenges. Faith is not a leap into the unknown, but a leap into the known that we are blind to. Faith is not a leap into something completely obscure, but a leap into what we have not yet recognized, into the values we already possess within ourselves, into a commitment to the good things. As you slowly drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently lead you into a peaceful space. Leaping into faith is not about abandoning reason, but about choosing a life that is full and authentic, even without perfect answers. It is in faith that you will find the strength to overcome anxiety, to live in stillness and peace, with trust in yourself and the world around you. In the stillness of the night, as the light of the day fades away, you may feel a deep sense of peace enveloping you, and a question may begin to rise in your mind. Does the world around me really exist as I perceive it? Or is it just a creation of my mind? A question that may seem simple at first, yet it opens the door to an infinite philosophical depth, where you begin to question what you once considered certain. Perhaps, in these moments of reflection, you will encounter an intriguing philosophical perspective by George Berkeley, an influential philosopher from England who proposed that to be is to be perceived. Berkeley was the founder of the school of thought known as idealism, in which he argued that material objects do not exist independently of the mind. According to him, the world is not an objective reality, existing beyond our reach, but rather, the world is a collection of perceptions in each individual's mind. In other words, everything you see, feel, or even imagine is simply a mental image created by your mind, not independent entities but reflections, impressions within your perception. Esse est percipi. George Berkeley, a treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge. This famous quote by Berkeley may surprise you because it entirely contradicts the way we typically think about the world. To exist is not something external to us, but rather it is to be perceived. Everything exists only when it is perceived, felt in our minds. You may think that the table you are seeing, the tree outside the window, or the sound of the wind are real, independent objects. But according to Berkeley, these things only exist when you perceive them, when you see, hear, and feel them. If you no longer see the table or hear the wind, then those things cease to exist, at least in your mind. Imagine sitting in a dark room, unable to see anything, and no object around you can be called real if you cannot perceive it. The world, according to Berkeley, is not a static reality, not an objective world we simply observe. In fact, the world is a dynamic process, a presence in the mind, where every object and event must be perceived by a subject for it to exist. If there is no one to perceive it, no one to recognize it, the world does not exist in consciousness. This may surprise you, but Berkeley's view offers a liberating perspective. When everything around you is formed in your mind, when you are the creator of your world through each perception, you may find more freedom in your experience of life. You no longer face a rigid, unchangeable world. The world you live in is, in essence, a journey of awareness, where you can continually change the way you perceive and experience things. Every object, every event is not a fixed entity, but something you take in and feel, capable of changing based on your perception and senses. Berkeley also mentioned that even when no human beings are present, when there are no perceptions, the world still exists, but it exists in another way. He believed in a great mind, or God, an invisible and infinite entity that he believed God perceives everything, thus the world continues to exist in his perception. This concept introduces a profound idea about the relationship between humanity and the universe, between individual existence and the shared existence of the world. When we understand that this world is a collection of perceptions in our minds, we begin to realize that every feeling we have, every experience we encounter, is somehow connected to the larger world around us. We are not merely isolated individuals, but part of a spiritual network where each action, each thought, impacts the entire universe. So, as you lie in the stillness of this night, let these thoughts gently seep into your mind. Try imagining that everything you feel, everything you see, is not an absolute truth, but a part of the world you create in your mind. You have the ability to change your perception, and it is in this change that you will discover new depths about the world and yourself. To be is to be perceived. In perception, in awareness, you will see that the world and you are not separate entities, but parts of a whole, an invisible connection. With these thoughts, as you slowly drift into sleep, let the peace envelop you as you realize that the world is not something beyond your reach, but a part of you. Every perception, every awareness is a thread connecting you to the universe, and in that connection, you find true peace and freedom. As you lie in the stillness of the night, with the quiet enveloping you, you may find yourself experiencing a subtle but profound sensation, a sense of unease about your own identity. Who am I really, you may ask? Am I really who I think I am, or am I just a collection of sensations, memories, and impressions that my mind creates? This question, though seemingly simple, opens a deep philosophical inquiry that challenges your understanding of yourself and the world. And in these moments of reflection, you may discover a profound philosophical perspective offered by David Hume, a great 18th century philosopher, who suggested that the self, the I, is not a fixed entity, but rather a bundle of sensations and experiences that we perceive throughout life. Hume, one of the most influential philosophers of his time, developed a philosophy of the self that was not based on something solid or unchanging, but as a collection of perceptions and impressions. He argued that we do not have a fixed self, an eternal I, but what we call I is merely a combination of the sensations, images, sounds, and emotions that we continuously experience. The self is nothing but a bundle of perceptions. This is Hume's view, where he describes the self as a bundle of perceptions, a synthesis of the impressions, thoughts, and feelings that we constantly encounter. When you question yourself, have you ever thought that the self you perceive is just a series of sensations and impressions? Every time you look in the mirror, do you see yourself? Or do you see the reflection that your mind has created? Every action, every thought you have is, in fact, just a reflection of what you perceive, the experiences you've had in life. In Hume's theory, there is no fixed self. The self is a composition, a result of constantly changing perceptions and experiences. Be a philosopher, but amidst all your philosophy, be still a man. David Hume, A Treatise of Human Nature. When Hume says that we are merely a bundle of perceptions, he does not deny the presence of the self, but simply affirms that the self is not an eternal entity. It is a constantly changing process, continually evolving with time and circumstance. Every sensation, every impression we receive contributes to the formation of the self, but this self is not something static or fixed. When we perceive ourselves, we do not see a permanent being, but only the reflections, the images that our minds create. This might make us feel uneasy about who we truly are, but at the same time it offers a profound freedom. If the self is not a fixed entity, but a combination of sensations and thoughts, then we are not creatures trapped in a rigid form, but we can change, evolve, and transform with every moment, every choice we make. However, when Hume says that we are just a bundle of perceptions, this does not mean that life is meaningless or without essence. In fact, Hume asserts that it is precisely in the change and diversity of our sensations that we find meaning. We are not always in possession of our faculties, and the mind is sometimes at variance with itself. We do not always have control over every feeling or thought, and our minds are sometimes inconsistent with themselves. But it is in these changes, in the conflicts between our feelings and thoughts, that we find the vitality of the self, the continuous transformation in our minds. One of the important features of Hume's philosophy is the concept of cause and effect, which he argued is simply a habit we form in the course of living. Cause and effect is not a matter of reason, but of habit. According to Hume, we cannot directly perceive the relationship between cause and effect. We only rely on habits, on patterns we have seen repeat in life. Everything in life does not have an absolute cause and effect, but rather events that follow one another, which we become familiar with and understand through habit. It is in these habits, in these repeated events, that we build our view of the world and ourselves. Nothing is absolute. Everything is the result of the experiences, the sensations we undergo each day. So, as you lie down and feel the stillness of the night, think about yourself in the way Hume describes. Are you a fixed entity, or are you simply a collection of sensations, thoughts, and impressions that are constantly changing? Every moment, every choice you make creates a new image of yourself. But it is these changes that constitute who you are. You are not a rigid being, but a process, a continuous transformation, a bundle of perceptions that you can alter with every step you take in life. When you realize this, when you understand that you are not a fixed entity, you will feel more freedom in making choices, in living in the way you perceive to be right. You are not bound by a rigid identity, but can change, grow, and develop with each passing day, with each experience. It is in this freedom that you will find true peace and self-awareness, when you understand that you are not what you have been, but what you are becoming. And as you slowly drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently guide you. Remember, you are not a fixed being, but a combination of sensations, impressions, and thoughts. And it is through this continuous change, this becoming, that you remain alive and truly yourself. As the night falls and the sounds of the world fade away, you may begin to feel a gentle yet profound sense of unease rising within you. What does the future of humanity really look like? In a world filled with constant progress, technological advancements, and the relentless drive toward greater achievements, you might wonder if we, the small beings in this vast universe, truly have control over our fate, or if we are standing on the precipice of dangers we ourselves have created. These thoughts may stir feelings of anxiety, but they also open up a deep philosophical reflection on the existence and future of humanity. In modern times, with unprecedented advances in technology and science, one of the biggest questions we face is, can we protect ourselves from the risks that technology and human progress have created? This is a question raised by the Future of Humanity Institute in their research, warning that the rapid development of technology, especially artificial intelligence, AI, and synthetic biology, could pose existential risks to humanity. The future of humanity is uncertain, and it is up to us to shape it. Future of Humanity Institute. These words remind us that, while we are advancing rapidly in the technological revolution, we are also confronted with latent dangers that could threaten our very existence. Artificial intelligence, with its ability to learn and evolve beyond human intelligence, could one day become a powerful and uncontrollable entity, an unpredictable threat. Moreover, advances in synthetic biology, in the ability to create life from matter, open up miraculous possibilities, but also bring the risk of altering the very structure of life, making it difficult to control the consequences. As we look at these advances, part of us feels an immense excitement for the opportunities they bring. However, another part of us cannot help but worry about the dangers they also present. Could we live in a world where artificial intelligence, or even beings created through technology, could replace us, or even radically alter the nature of what it means to be human? Can we maintain control over the very technologies we have created? Our greatest danger is not that technology will destroy us, but that we will destroy ourselves with it. Future of Humanity Institute. This stark warning reminds us of the responsibility we hold in developing technology. We may create powerful tools, but we must ask ourselves if these tools could eventually spiral beyond our control. Do we have the foresight to look beyond the short-term benefits that technology offers and focus on protecting life, preserving humanity's existence against the very risks we are creating? Just as philosophers have warned about unchecked progress in society, strong technological developments must go hand in hand with long-term thinking, with an awareness of the consequences we may face in the future. Long-term thinking is not merely focusing on what can be achieved immediately, but the ability to look at the lasting effects of the actions and decisions we make today. If we fail to manage technology responsibly, if we do not recognize that our very existence may be threatened by the achievements we create, we may be facing risks that are beyond our comprehension. While many view technology as salvation, a means to achieve great human goals, some philosophers and scientists remind us that technology is also a double-edged sword, capable of both saving and destroying. Therefore, long-term thinking is not simply about looking at current technological achievements, but about considering the future we will leave for the next generation. So, as you lie in the stillness of this night, let these thoughts about the existence and future of humanity sink into your mind. You may feel anxious about the changes and advancements in technology, but at the same time, you may gain a deeper understanding that we have the power to choose, the responsibility to create a sustainable future. When you recognize that long-term thinking is essential to protect the existence of humanity, you will feel a sense of peace in your soul, knowing that the path ahead can still be shaped and we have the ability to build a better future, not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come. With these thoughts, as you gradually drift into sleep, let your mind ease into a calm space. Remember, the future of humanity depends not only on what we do today, but also on our ability to think long-term and create a world where technology serves sustainable development and the existence of all. As the night descends and the sounds of the world outside gradually fade, you may begin to sense a profound stillness, and a deep question may quietly emerge in your mind. What is consciousness? In a world filled with constant activity, societal expectations, and external pressures, have you ever wondered whether everything you perceive, the joy, the sorrow, the pain, and the pleasure, can truly be explained just by the chemical processes in your brain, or is there something more mysterious behind it? This question forms the basis of the hard problem of consciousness, a question that philosophers, scientists, and neuroscientists continue to explore. This question, though simple, reflects one of the greatest challenges in modern philosophy and science. When we look at the brain, we see electrical and chemical activities, nerve impulses continuously firing. But how can these physical activities translate into subjective experiences? The feelings of love, the sensation of pain, or the colors we perceive in a painting? How can the neurons, with their electrical signals, create the rich inner world of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that we experience? The hard problem of consciousness is the problem of explaining why any physical state is conscious rather than non-conscious. David Chalmers, The Conscious Mind in Search of a Fundamental Theory. David Chalmers, one of the foremost philosophers in the study of consciousness, described this issue as the hard problem of consciousness. He pointed out that while we can describe the physical activities in the brain, the electrical impulses, the chemical changes, we still cannot explain why these activities are accompanied by subjective experience. Why does the feeling of pain arise when neural signals pass through a specific part of the brain? And why do the electrical signals in the brain create a rich inner world, filled with sensations, thoughts, and perceptions we call consciousness? Chalmers does not deny that we can understand the physical mechanisms of the brain, but he points out that this is not enough to explain why these mechanisms give rise to conscious experience. This is the crux of the hard problem of consciousness, the gap between the physical brain and subjective experience. While we can study the physical activities in the brain and even model neurological behaviors, the real issue lies in how these physical activities give rise to conscious experience. Something we feel but cannot fully grasp or explain through language or science. As you reflect on this, you may begin to feel the ambiguity of the problem. Are our feelings, such as joy, anxiety, or the perception of beauty, truly just the result of chemical and electrical responses in the brain? Or is there something deeper behind these phenomena? If everything is just a physical response, why does the feeling of love make you feel like there is an invisible energy overflowing in your heart? Why does pain make you feel as if it stirs your entire body, even if there is only a small wound on your skin? While science is striving to solve this problem, some philosophers have suggested that perhaps we will never fully understand consciousness because there is a part of it that we cannot control, that cannot be expressed in language or scientific theory. Consciousness, perhaps, is not something that can be completely analyzed or understood from a purely physical standpoint. It is a subjective phenomenon, and as such, we can only experience it, not fully explain it through language or theory. This is the intriguing aspect of the study of consciousness. While we may be able to uncover how neurons function, how electrical impulses move in the brain, we cannot explain why all these things create a world of sensations, a world that we feel is real but cannot precisely describe with language or scientific tools. This may make you feel helpless in searching for an answer, but it can also bring a sense of humility. For consciousness may be something that goes beyond our understanding, beyond what we can measure or describe. I think, therefore I am. René Descartes, Meditations on First Philosophy. But no matter how complex this issue may be, there is one undeniable truth. I can perceive myself. Our consciousness is what constitutes our existence, and each of us experiences this consciousness in our own unique way, with our own distinct feelings and thoughts. It is in this awareness, no matter how vague, that we find life, that we find ourselves. So, as you lie in the quiet of this night, let the thoughts about consciousness and its nature gently seep into your mind. We may never have a complete answer to the hard problem of consciousness, but it is in the search for that answer that we find ourselves. Consciousness is not just a biological phenomenon, but a part of life that we experience every day. And in those feelings, even if we cannot fully explain them with theory, we find life, peace, and a profound connection to the world around us. As you slowly drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently guide you. While the problem of consciousness may be an enigma that we have yet to solve, it is in this mystery that you will find freedom, for you do not need all the answers. Simply feel, simply live in each moment, and that is enough. As the night blankets everything in silence, with the thoughts and emotions of the day fading away, you may start to sense a subtle yet profound feeling within you. You might ask yourself, what is the self really? Am I truly the person I think I am, or am I merely a collection of memories, feelings, and impressions that my mind creates? This question, though seemingly simple, opens a profound philosophical inquiry that challenges our understanding of identity. Perhaps in these moments of reflection, you will encounter an important concept proposed by modern scholars. The self is, in fact, an illusion, a story that the brain tells itself to create our sense of self. The self, or the ego, is one of the most debated topics in philosophy. Do we truly exist as a fixed entity, as a singular observer, or are we just a continuous flow of memories, emotions, and impressions that our mind constantly creates? Philosophers like David Hume, Daniel Dennett, and many modern scientists argue that the self is not a fixed entity, but rather a compilation of experiences, feelings, and thoughts that the brain continually constructs and connects. The self is not a thing, but a process of becoming. Daniel Dennett, Consciousness Explained. This quote by Daniel Dennett reveals that the self is not a static entity, but a constantly changing process, much like an endless flow. We are not a fixed observer, nor an eternal ego. Instead, we are streams of emotions, memories, and impressions that our mind recreates every day. According to Dennett, the self is merely a construct the brain creates to allow us to perceive ourselves in the world, but it is not a tangible entity. When you ponder this idea, you might begin to realize that the self you know, the I you identify with, is not a stable, unchanging being. It is a continuous flow, a story that your mind creates, shaped by the perceptions and experiences you undergo in life. Every time you look into the mirror, are you seeing yourself, or just the reflection your mind has created? Every action, every thought you have is, in fact, just a reflection of what you perceive, of the experiences you've had throughout your life. In Hume's and Dennett's theories, the self is not a fixed object. It is a process, a result of ever-changing perceptions and experiences. Be a philosopher, but amidst all your philosophy, be still a man. David Hume, A Treatise of Human Nature. When Hume states that we are merely a bundle of perceptions, he doesn't deny the presence of the self. Rather, he affirms that the self is not a permanent entity, but a process that constantly changes with time and circumstance. Every sensation, every impression we receive contributes to the formation of the self, but this self is not a permanent fixture. When we perceive ourselves, we don't see a permanent being, but only the reflections, the images that our minds create. This might make us uneasy about our true nature, but at the same time, it offers a profound freedom. If the self is not a fixed entity, but a combination of feelings and thoughts, then we are not confined to a rigid form. We can change, evolve, and transform with every moment, every choice we make. However, when Hume and Dennett say that we are just a bundle of perceptions, it does not mean that life is meaningless or without essence. On the contrary, they argue that it is precisely in the change and diversity of perceptions that we find meaning. We are not always in possession of our faculties, and the mind is sometimes at variance with itself. We don't always have control over every feeling or thought, and our minds are sometimes inconsistent with themselves. But it is in these changes, in the conflicts between feelings and thoughts, that we find the vitality of the self, the ongoing transformation of our minds. One important aspect of Hume's and Dennett's philosophies is the concept of cause and effect, which they argue is a habit we form over time. Cause and effect is not a matter of reason, but of habit. According to Hume, we can't directly perceive the relationship between cause and effect. We rely on habits, on patterns we've seen repeat in life. Everything in life does not have an absolute cause and effect, but rather a sequence of events that we've become familiar with and understand through habit. It is in these habits, in these repeated events, that we build our understanding of the world and of ourselves. Everything is not absolute. It is the result of experiences and feelings we undergo each day. So, as you lie in the stillness of the night, think about yourself in the way Hume and Dennett describe. Are you a fixed entity, or are you simply a bundle of perceptions, thoughts, and feelings that are constantly changing? Every moment, every choice you make creates a new image of yourself. But it is these changes that constitute who you are. You are not a rigid entity. You are a process, an ever-evolving being, a bundle of perceptions that you can change with every step you take in life. When you realize this, when you understand that you are not a fixed entity, you will feel more freedom in your choices, in the way you live according to your own perceptions. You are not bound by a rigid identity, but can change, grow, and develop with each passing day, with each experience. It is in this freedom that you will find true peace and self-awareness when you realize that you are not what you have been, but what you are becoming. And as you slowly drift into sleep, let these thoughts gently guide you. Remember, the self is not something to find or possess. It is a process, a story your mind creates, and it is through this continuous creation that you find your freedom and true peace.